Good morning. Good morning. I might have said this before, but I remember watching this movie and there was a guy, older guy, who came on screen and he said, "Hey, I've just reached my personal best." And the guy says, "Of what?" And he says, "Consecutive days alive." And I love that quote. I think about it a lot. Sometimes when I wake up, I think to myself, "Yep, I've got another personal best under my belt." Um, and it's actually relevant for what I'm talking about today because if you haven't been catching up so far, my name is Andre Bright. I'm an executive coach and I help people recover from burnout. And one of the things that came up as a question is this relationship with burnout and fear. And a comment I had talked about the 6 basic fears outlined by Napoleon Hill in his book, Think and Grow Rich. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, that was interesting because obviously fear is a great part of burnout. Fear brings stress within the body. Stress not dealt with over time leads to burnout. So I thought to myself, okay, how about I break down all these fears one by one? Initially, I was going to do one overall um, post or video, but I thought in terms of content, it would be good to actually break these down because there's a difference between all of them. If you're not familiar with what these fears are, number one, fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. So I started on Monday, which means we've done fear of poverty, we've done fear of criticism, we've done fear of ill health, we've done fear of loss of love of someone, which was yesterday. Today I'm looking at fear of old age. And when I started looking at it initially, I was like, I'm not sure, I wasn't sure really how this particular topic would go down because it seems like such a simple idea. But again, the more I look into it, the more I deep some of the issues that we experience, the more I realize it's a very real issue that people are scared of is the old age, death separately, right? So death is something we're going to talk about tomorrow morning, but fear of old age specifically, and specifically as well, fear of time and the loss of time. Am I too late for that opportunity? Um, am I too old to be doing this? Right? Am I too old to be thinking about that? And I think today is going to be a very interesting one. It may bring up things that you may not have realized, um, realize you were experiencing or considering. Some of it is experiential, some of it is to do with culture, some of it is to do with environment. But there are a lot of things that build up over time that tell us something about old age. And when we in what's the word I'm looking for? When we absorb these ideas about what old age means and what it can look like, if it's not something that you want, you can actually grow fearful of it. You can do everything you want, everything you can to avoid it, even though it's inevitable, right? There's a quote that says, um, growing older is inevitable, old is a choice, or something along those lines, right? Old is a state of mind. Depending on what you believe about growing old will tell you how it's going to look for you. If you believe old to be in an old people's home, you're not going to be able to walk, you're not going to be able to work, you're not going to be able to do all these things, then of course you're going to be scared of growing older. Of course, if you're going to believe that you're just going to lose all your friends, etc., right? But if you believe growing old means something else, it was about when you consider or something. Um, bearing in mind you would have worked 40 years, right? Your first 20 years are just building up the knowledge to be able to work. Then you work for 40 years, right? So now you're 60 something, right? Or 45 years. And then that is when you're meant to start your life, right? And then if for most of us, if you're living in a world where your life expectancy is around 75, for example, that gives you 10 years to enjoy it. If that is the way you're living, then that might be adding to this fear as well. Good morning, by the way, everyone. So good to see you this morning. And if there's any questions or whatever, yes, Gabby, yes, Michelle, welcome. Um, if there's any questions of some of the things I'm talking about today, just throw a comment in there, a comment in here if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, a comment in here if you're on Instagram, and I'll answer it. I think on Instagram you got the functionality of actually posing it as a question in the bottom right if you put in the little question mark. Getting older means can be wiser or work smarter. Yeah, that too. One of the things I used to think growing up, actually, I used to be confused about why we treat older people the way we treat them, because I thought if you're older, it means you have more knowledge. If you have more knowledge, then it means you're wiser. And so we should actually be learning from them. And one of the things I find about living in the West, I say living in the UK, is there's definitely differences in the way we treat older people. So for example, back home, we don't really have old people homes. Usually what happens is that the older generation of us would live in our houses, or we'd build a house for them, which is part of our compound, right? And so you'd have a house help who caters to them. You'd have, so for example, my grandma in Sierra Leone, she lives in a house with other people who live in there as well. We have people who are tending to her, but she's very strong, you know. She eats well, she does her daily exercise. We have like a newborn within the compound as well, which means that she's got that energy to put it into. I called her up last night and she's still cracking the same jokes that she always used to. She's still scolding grown men who are walking around at the times when they're not supposed to, all this kind of stuff. She's still the same person. She's still got that energy, that vim. She's still the life and soul of the party, and she's in her 80s, right? And a late 80s of that, and she doesn't show any signs of deteriorating. It's interesting when you get to that. There's I want to say maybe Okinawa. I'm just looking at it now, right? Let me see 1 second. There is a Japanese city, Anmoku. It's not the one I was thinking of. I want to say Okinawa. Anyway, yeah, Okinawa. There we go. Okinawa is one of the one of the world's blue zones, and the idea is it's renowned for long life, right? So if you've ever heard of this concept of ikigai, for example, one of the cities that they use as the example for that is Okinawa in Japan, and basically there's so many people in that city who are living older than 100 years old that people were wondering how they managed to do it. It's so normal now in that space. The young people, people who are 100 are going for runs together and all that kind of stuff. And there's certain principles that they found after studying that city that they now teach in other countries. And that area is called the Blue Zone. And there are different blue zones around the world. There's one in Italy, there's some in South America. And some of the principles they have is that, one, they have community. And so they're not alone. One of the things I find happening in the West is we kind of leave our older generation. And I think that adds to our fear of becoming old. If we abandon that generation, then why would we want to become it, right? And part of it is because we isolate them, right? We keep them at arm's length. As soon as they get to a certain age, we remove them from our societies and we put them together. And so there's that idea they're together, right? One, they keep physically active. Three is they keep healthy, right? So their diet is very good, right? Very healthy for them. So they have community, they have exercise, they have diet, right? But then also they continue to be productive. So that doesn't necessarily mean, I think it's interesting. There's a difference between work and a job, right? I think one of the things, consider this as a representation of us saying, okay, cool, I've gotten to this age now, I don't want to work anymore, right? And that actually has a curse and a blessing attached to it. Work doesn't have to be a job. It can just be putting your skills to use. And what can happen is, if we don't have anything to do with our skills, we can grow like a muscle which isn't used. Like anything that isn't used, after a long time, it atrophies. So we lose our ability to be productive if we don't use it, right? So there's an element about this city where they keep themselves active, keep themselves in community and connected to different people, keep themselves eating well, keep themselves enjoying themselves. They don't take themselves too seriously. They have games, movie night, they have do all these things to the point where people look forward to joining that group. I remember reading this article, and there was a woman who spent her last days on a cruise ship because she realized that it was actually cheaper to go on a cruise back to back than it was to spend money to be in an old people's home. And the thing is, if you compare those two, in an old people's home, you're medicated, you're it's basically a hospice. They're just preparing you to die, right? Versus being on a cruise ship where you get to see the world, you get to meet new people all the time. The staff knew her. You get all this food from different parts of the world. You get to tick off your bucket list, all this kind of stuff. And so she looked at the pros and cons of both, and she chose for her last, I don't know, 10, 15 years of her life, she would just go on cruises back to back. Now, for me, that would give me something to be excited about when I get older. I'll be able to do that kind of thing. And what I find is that if we don't have stuff like that to look forward to, it can cause this fear. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. So if you just joined in, I'm Andre Bright, executive coach, and I help people recover from burnout. Today, we're talking about fear of old age, which is one of the things that can drive us towards burnout. Fear being something that brings cortisol within the body to a level that becomes toxic when not dealt with over time, can lead us towards burnout, which has symptoms such as back pains, headaches, insomnia, changes of behavior, changes of emotion and mindset, and all these kind of things can happen as a result of burnout. And you might be experiencing this. And if you are, you can get in touch with me. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, there's a over here somewhere, there is a barcode that you can look at. And if you're on Instagram, you can message me, DM me. Today, actually, I'm going to be spending the rest of my afternoon. I want to donate time. Well, not donate, actually. I'm just going to give it at a lower rate. So I'm going to do sessions for £50. They're just going to be half an hour, like laser coaching sessions. For those of you who have never tried it before and you want to give it a go, you don't know how it works, but you don't necessarily want to commit to an entire 12 weeks. I'm going to be spending this afternoon specifically just giving away £50 slots, and you can just come in, come out, test it, see what it's like. And in that session, we're going to be going deep into what is causing your burnout. It doesn't have to be about burnout, but that's what I'm focusing on in this particular live. What is it you need? Where can you get it? When did it go wrong? What can you do about it now? And we'll get you a plan for how to step forward. So back to today's session on fear of old age. It can stem from societal expectations. I've mentioned just before, your environment can have a big impact into your perception of what old age looks like. And if it doesn't paint a good picture, it's going to build this fear. It can be stem from the fear of decline in health. If you've had been living with someone who's older and living towards the end of their life, and you see what that can look like, you can have a very real idea about what that decline of health might look like, and you can become scared of it, right? I mentioned before on 2 days ago, I think it was the fear of ill health, right? So if you see someone who's not in a healthy state and you see what it does to them, or you have a hereditary condition, or you experience something growing up, you might find yourself fearful of ill health or decline in health, and you do everything to avoid it. Become a hypochondriac, be fearful whenever anything happens. You'll be one of those Google monsters who goes to look for whatever's wrong with you at the slightest symptom that you might experience, and then you find yourself in fearful state constantly, right? It's the same thing here. Fear of old age can stem from societal expectations. Like I said, they expect you to, like, you can see this actually in the workplace. When you get to a certain age, it's actually really difficult to find a job, because they're like, okay, this person's going to be retiring soon, or they're not going to be as functional or as sharp as some of the old younger generations. But what I found is that there's a lot of people who are upskilling older generations, because they realize that actually with age, like you said before, Michelle, comes wisdom, and the way they would approach a situation is going to be different, because they've been in the system for so long. They've seen so much. So their perspective is actually going to be very different. And there's actually a blessing in having someone who's an older kilt within your team, because they can actually slow you down a little bit. They can help you be more introspective. They can help you be more considerate of the wider range of people who are going to be affected by your services or products and things like that. They'll be able to ask you simple questions that might help you build a more robust solution. All these things can be a blessing, but workplaces shun those. That complete generation. A lot of the time, I was speaking to someone recently, and they said that they were having real trouble getting back into the workspace, and had to become an entrepreneur because they won't be able to get a job. Imagine that. Um, and here's another one that can happen, right? The fear of old age can also stem from decline in health or appearance, right? So you might find yourself, you're what I can't remember the name, but as your spine curls over and and your skin becomes saggy, and all these kind of things can happen. If you see this and you don't see that as a something that you want, you might find a fear in that. But then it can also be attached to your health. Yes, Hannah, welcome. Yes, Chris, welcome. Yes, Dean, good to see you, man. Pleasure to see you all. Thank you for sharing this time with me this morning. I'm talking about the fear of old age and the connection between that and burnout. I've just mentioned about it being able to stem from societal expectations, fear of decline in health or appearance. And the last thing as well is concerns about mortality. One of the things about getting older is the idea of getting closer towards death. We talk about death separately as a fear tomorrow, but the idea about the longer you live, the closer you get towards death. I had a conversation yesterday about 4,000 weeks. And so there was this research that was done. They said on average, our lifespan leads us to about age 70 something, right? I can't remember what the specific age is at this specific time. And they worked out that that's about roughly about 4,000 weeks. And so there was a book called 4,000 Weeks, which led towards a calendar. And the calendar, you could tick off each week. And the idea is you can step back and say, I have done this many weeks and I've got this many weeks left. Now, depending on your mindset, that can drive you towards action and getting yourself done and be something that is motivating, or it can be something that can be actually quite detrimental. You can be focused towards what you have left, the glass half empty effect, right? But I thought it was really interesting because one of the things I'm talking about today as well is attached to that. So what could happen if you have a fear of old age? It can lead to anxiety about aging, right? That we talked about before, an actual anxiety about it. You're scared. Also, old isn't a number. It's like saying I want to be fit or healthy. There's no measurable attribute to that. So it's actually psychological. If you'll notice that when you're young, 30 seemed old. Once you reach 30, you realize you're just getting started. You haven't even warmed up. You're still in the bleachers, right? So old is a concept. If you speak to people in Okinawa, I promise you, they won't think 80 years old either, right? So then the question is, if old isn't a number, I can talk about age, but if old isn't a number, then it's actually subjective. It's an age that you put on that idea. And it will be good actually as a reflection for you right now watching this. What age is old to you? And then reflect on where that idea came from. And has it always been that way? Did you grow up believing that age is old, or did it change through time? What if you were to become that age, do you feel like you would consider that to be old? Because some of us do get to an age where we're like, oh no, I'm old. Yeah, I'm fully old. I'm finished. Right. But then what does that mean to you? Right. And I think it's really important for us to reflect on these ideas, because until we get there, we actually do have autonomy over what that means for us. I always say it's a curse and a blessing having imagination. We can attach meanings to things as humans, but we often attach meanings that are detrimental to us, that don't serve us, even though we have just as much autonomy to create a meaning that serves us as one that's detrimental. We choose the latter a lot of the time, right? So it can also remind you of being unfulfilled in life when you're growing older, right? What haven't I done? There's this I can't remember who it was by, but there's this quote, and we've probably all heard of it, where there was a research where they asked people on their last days what they remember about the life or what they want to take away from it, and most people talked about the things that they wish they had done. And they felt, oh no, I should have done this, or I could have done this. And there's also this idea, one of my favorites is, my greatest fear is meeting the person I could have been, like the gap between who you are and your potential, basically. um And so all of this can build up towards fear. And if you're conscious of it on your daily experience, it can drive you towards making decisions that can actually hurt you towards it as well as away from it, right? It can create this sense of urgency to achieve your goals before time runs out, which could be a good thing. Like I said, like sometimes it builds motivation, this idea of mortality. We've all had that experience when you're around someone who is losing their ability to do things. Like, so for example, if anyone who facilitates spaces, you might find, especially online or but definitely in person, you ask for something of the audience, right? Clap your hands or get up and do this, that, and the other. You have to be very cautious that within the audience you might have people who can't do that, right? They can't clap their hands. They don't have that kind of mobility. They can't stand. They're in a wheelchair. All these kind of things can happen. But one of those things is when I'm in a situation, it kind of reminds me of that. If you can stand, please do. If you can clap your hands, please do. Or just give me a sign that you're paying attention, whatever that might be. Give them the autonomy to be able to respond the way they can. I sometimes think about Stephen Hawking. He is one of the smartest people on the planet, but he's been in a wheelchair for and in his degenerative state since he was a teenager, right? Since uni. But would you say he's lived an unfulfilled life? No, he's created incredible things and he's actually got a sense of humor. Like if you watch some of his interviews, some of the jokes he cracks, I'm like, how? Right? He's actually living his life. And he definitely I can't remember when it was, but he was talking about death and how he doesn't necessarily fear it in that sense. But he talks about his life more. Michelle says, my idea of age is growing as I am. I don't focus on my age, but in the person I'm becoming day by day, 100%. And it's always that pursuit, right? You're becoming, like, it's actually exciting to become the person you could be, right? And it's really, for me, I'm really passionate. When I started to look into this as a topic, I became more and more aware of how it shows up in our lives. And the more I became aware, the more passionate I became about the topic. So it became a vicious cycle. So now I'm really excited to be able to talk to this with you. The fear of old age can manifest as a constant pressure to accomplish everything quickly, and the fear of not living up to your potential, and a sense of regret for missed opportunities. That's the idea about fear of time that I mentioned before. Sometimes for you, it might not be a fear of old age, but a fear of lost time, which are connected to each other, but separate in terms of the framework that you're looking at it. Either way, it's something to do with time and your ability and what you can and can't do, right? I genuinely feel like if we reframe what it means to be old, how people grow old will change. And I think it's important. One of the things that I saw recently is thinking about mini retirements through your lifestyle, through your life. Like one of the things I'm working on is to get to the stage where I can have 3 months on work, 1 month off, 3 months on, 1 month off. So in the year, I'd have 3 months off to be able to travel, to be able to live experiences, to be able to go to a new country, to be able to, do all these things that life has to offer while I'm in my state where I'm still got control of my, senses, my body, and I'm still fit and healthy. I don't want to wait till I'm 70 something to begin that, which means that when I get old, it's just going to be another day, similar to what Michelle just said. The idea of age is growing as I am. So I'm trying to build a lifestyle, which is something I would be happy to continue past, you know. There's a few interviews I've seen where there's people who are like, what do you mean retire? I love what I do. Why would I stop? Like there's this idea of 10,000 hours. A lot of it came from, again, going back to Japanese philosophy about this idea of what's the word? The Japanese have a word for their approach to work. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But anyway, this idea that you continuously improve over time, right? And they were talking to artisans who've been working their entire life, and they just get better and better and better, and they become masters at their craft. And these people were in their 80s, they're in their 90s, and they have no sign of giving up. They're like, I love what I do. I wake up and I just want to find new ways to build pots, to sharpen swords, to create woodwork and art, within the legs of the table and all these kind of stuff. Like, it's what I'm passionate about. Why would I stop? Like, if I stop, I would lose my mind, you know? And I think that perspective is so interesting to me, because it's like, once you get to that stage, do you ever really grow old? Waking up at 95 years old, excited to do something that contributes to the world, it's a whole different thing. And it's not because of capitalism, it's just because you get to put your skills to work. The whole idea of ikigai is that, you're doing something that you love, doing something you're good at, something that the world needs, and something, um, what's the fourth one? And something people would pay for. That's just a side. Yes, people would pay for it. Great, but I'll do it anyway. Right? That for me is like the nirvana. Okay, so one of the last things I want to talk about, though, is that it can also result in the fear of growing old, can also result in decision paralysis, right? So when you're thinking about life, you're like, oh, this is such a big case because this is going to affect me 20, 30 years down the line, that I don't know what to do now. I don't know what decision to make now because I don't know what the effect will be later. That can also that can result in decision paralysis, that paranoia, right? And decision paralysis can lead to procrastination. So this decision is so big, I don't want to make it now, so I'm going to delay it, right? And leave it till later. One of the things I've talked about is procrastination before. Procrastination can have many different faces, right? It can be the fact that, because they say a lot of creatives are procrastinators because you need time to process. Like, your creative process is going to be a lot longer than the average logical person, the academic person. So you might need time to get your ideas together, and you need the room to be able to play and have ideas that come and go, etc. So to give room for that idea to grow. And that might look like procrastination. Procrastination can also, however, be a fear of perfectionism. Like, so for example, perfectionism can be a fear of failure, can be a fear of judgment, can be a fear of abandonment if you get anything wrong, a fear of not being enough, all those kind of things. And all of that fear can lead you to delay the action, which is what procrastination is, right? But in this stage, it can also be the fear of the impact. So if I make this decision now, I don't know what will happen down the line. I don't know what impact this will have, right? Yes, Italia, welcome, welcome. And how you doing, Dean and Michelle? Hope all of this is resonating for you. Any questions, like I said, or any thoughts, put them in the comments and I'll read them and respond. Yeah, procrastination is a big issue. It can be cause all kinds of things, right? But going back again to one of the points I made before, it can result in the lack of fulfillment due to the pressure to accomplish everything at once. Right now, everything needs to be done now, so that I don't have to do it later on, thinking that you won't be able to later on, right? But if you now know that actually growing older doesn't mean you can't do things, then you actually have more time, and you don't have to rush, and you don't have to do everything right now. You can take your time and actually be in the moment. Imagine you can actually be in the moment and enjoy what you do have right now. So I think it's important to consider it. It's something that, for me, I never considered myself to have a fear of old age. But when I did the research, I could see how society leads us to be fearful of old age. I think right now, maybe there's slightly starting to be a turn. I've noticed, for example, there is, with AI and with all these kinds of different things, there's, like I said before, there's companies who literally specifically upskill older people. I'm seeing a lot more representation of the older generation on adverts, etc., doing things like activities and, running and dancing and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're getting a lot more of that now, which I think is exciting thing to see. It's getting us subconsciously to know that being old doesn't mean being unable. I think slowly, very, very slowly, and they're seeing the benefits of it, like I mentioned earlier. So I think that is slowly starting to change, but it's very, very slow, very, very slow. And I think us in the West need to be aware of that. I think we can learn a lot from Okinawa in the way they approach the older generation, how they approach growing older, how they approach work, how they approach play. And I think our perspective can really impact how we grow old. All right. So let's say you do have this fear of old age. What can you do about it? As usual, I got my 6 steps, and I'm just going to rush through these because they're starting to become very similar to the ones I've done before, because really they're the same thing. Fear in general, you have a process to recover from that, right? But here are things that I would suggest. One is embrace the aging process as a natural part of life with its own beauty and wisdom. We talked about this before. If you can, when you think of old age, what comes to mind? If you picture someone in a wheelchair who's wrinkly and hanging over themselves and on a drip and all that kind of stuff, it's going to create fear. Reframe that idea in your mind about what that looks like, because one, it's inevitable, so that's what you're gonna become. But two, what you perceive to be it is what you probably become. Because if you have a new image of it being beautiful, being exciting, being full of wisdom and vitality, then you'll do things now to maintain that, so that when it comes, you are that older person who is going for walks in the morning, who is, starting a business at 70. Like, some of the things I sometimes think about is how a lot of these millionaires and billionaires started their businesses post 50, right? They started their businesses that took them off post 50, right? And if we don't have that in mind, we'd often think to ourselves, okay, when I get to 60, it's over. It's not over, it might just be starting. Number two is focus on healthy lifestyle habits and self-care to maintain physical and mental well-being, making sure you stretch, making sure you get eating well. All the things that they do in Okinawa, like I mentioned before, those blue zones, right? Study them, look at what they do. They remain connected with their friends and family, and they remain healthy by doing physical exercise. They remain healthy by consuming good food, like fresh fruit, all that kind of stuff, maintaining a strong diet. They remain active and contributing. There's a thing about what one of the things I've realized, right? And this is a little bit of a segue, but it's related, is I genuinely feel if we don't contribute to society, we feel like we atrophy. I genuinely feel like when we don't contribute to society, we start to decline, we start to slip. I think there's actually a muscle that helps our fulfillment by feeling like we are contributing to society. And I genuinely feel like when we don't, it's a slippery slope. Like, I feel it like there's a slippery slope. You don't necessarily want to be completely defined by what you produce, but I genuinely have seen, and research suggests there's a link between our contribution to society and our well-being. We want to feel like we are able, right? We want to feel like we are capable, right? And Michelle says, I know what it's like to fear wasted time, but now I accepted that I have to travel this life at my own pace without comparing myself to others. Absolutely. And one of the things is there's actually no rush. Like, if someone gets there at 30 versus 50, what's the difference if we both get there? Plus, your journey might have experienced some other things that they might not. Like, if you're climbing a mountain, I'll give you an example. When I was in, this is an analogy, okay? So when I was in South Africa with my friends, we went to Cable Mountain, and anyone who's been, Table Mountain, sorry, in South Africa, in Cape Town, anyone who's been knows there's a cable car that leads you to the top. It takes about 20 minutes. We got to that cable car and we were like, do you want to walk? And we did, right? So we walked up Table Mountain, right? When I tell you the journey we had, it took all day, to be honest, but the journey we had was incredible. Like, actually climbing Table Mountain was an experience in itself that we wouldn't have got if we had taken the cable car. Now, obviously, everyone got the view at the top. Fantastic. But our experience of Table Mountain is completely different from those who took the cable. Something of what life has to offer on the actual journey itself, of the experience as well as the destination, right? Getting to the end is great until you get there. I need to write that down somewhere. Getting to the end is great until you get there, and then it's over. If that was all it was about, then getting to the end is actually going to be everything. I had a conversation with someone, a friend of like some really incredible people who have basically done, if life was a game, they finished it. They've done all the levels, they've done all the side missions. There's nothing left to do, and there was no barriers anymore. They're that rich that they can just walk into a room and all the doors open, right? But then what do you do with that? Like, there's nothing left for you to live for anymore. Like, sometimes part of the excitement about life is the striving for something. If you find yourself in a state where you're not striving anymore, you can grow bored, right? And if you think to yourself that if you have a lifestyle and habits and self-care which don't allow you to enjoy life, then you're going to think very badly of what is to come, right? So focus on a healthy lifestyle habits and self-care to maintain physical and mental well-being. It's really important. Number 3 is cultivate a positive outlook on aging by seeking out role models and resources that celebrate aging gracefully. Join a group. Find one thing that's really important for me is my relationship with my grandma. I think if I didn't have the relationship I have with my grandma, I maybe wouldn't have this perception of old age as I do now, because I go back home every year and because I'm in her presence and because I see how she is. She has more energy than most people my age. And seeing her the way she is completely changes my perception of what old age is, right? Or what old is. Like, I don't consider her to be old anymore, right? Wow, Hammer, what's going on, man? Long time. I was just talking about Japan earlier on. It's a pleasure to see you. Long time, long time. I hope you're well. We definitely need to catch up. And if you're ever in UK, let me know. Um, so yes, so cultivate a positive outlook by seeking out role models. Think about the people who are in the older generation who are doing amazing things. Like, I remember being in the Methodist Overseas Guest House in Birmingham. It's changed names now, but the caretaker, I went to visit him and he invited us for dinner one day, and going into his house was like going into Aladdin's cave. On his walls were like masks from this country and this empire, didgeridoos, like mattresses from India, and he traveled the world and got something from each country. And it was just like an incredible, it was like a museum. It was incredible. And each one had a story. Like, he had a life that was well lived. Seeing someone like him walk around and being like the bounce, like the heart and soul of the environment, means that I've got enough of those people in my life for me not to be as fearful of old age. In fact, I actually kind of I know that when I get there, I'm going to have so much fun. I'm going to have so much fun. And my mom, for example, she's retired. Some of the things that she's doing right now is incredible. Like, some of the things that she's doing now that she couldn't do when she was working. Now she has the time to. She's going around the world. She's doing all these amazing things, giving back to different people. She's healing. She's doing research on her own terms. She's writing. She's doing all kinds of stuff. She's preaching all kinds of stuff that she never really did when she was working. And now it feels like her life is starting again, like a renewed life. It's amazing to see. Striving looks different to different people. Every day we live, we strive to be and do better, even when we're doing things we have done many times before. Yeah. And like I said, that 10,000 hours, those artisans, you can do the same thing that you've always done before, but feel fulfilled by it, right? A lot of it is our perspective, though. So the whole thing about today is looking at how are we looking at it. If growing old is striking fear into your heart, maybe consider reflecting on what that means to you. And if it's something that isn't serving you, maybe consider reframing it into something that does. That's one thing I would want you to take away from today. And next time you're around your older generation or older generation in general, pay attention. Think about them a little bit more. Be more consciously aware of them. They are the generation that we really should be looking after right now, right? And we will become them one day and want someone to look after us. But then if we are in the state where we are healthy, we are jumping around, we have vitality, we're enjoying life, then the younger generation won't have to, right? We'll just be alive. Yes, Andrea, good to see you. Just to remind you, I've just done the third point on how to recover from fear of aging, right? And this is all connected to burnout. I'm a burnout recovery coach. So this is what I'm talking about every morning. So if this is something that is if you're interested in, let me know. Two things to let you know about. One is that I am giving away some, not giving them away, but I'm doing at a reduced rate this afternoon. And today is the 19th of July. This afternoon, I'm giving away £50 30-minute sessions with me. So the idea is to, if you haven't experienced coaching before, like usually the rates are like 150 to 250 to 300 kind of thing for the hour. But today I'm doing it for £50. And reason is because I think there's a lot of people who haven't done coaching before. They don't understand what it is. They don't understand the power, and they don't understand what influence that can have. So if this is something you're interested in, just DM me, message me, and I'll hook you up with that. The second thing is that we need to reframe our mind around growing old, or growing older, should we say? Okay. And thank you for keeping up, Michelle, Andrea, Dean, and Hammer. It's a pleasure to have you in here. Okay, number 4 is set realistic goals and priorities that align with your values and aspirations at any age. One of the things that I sometimes think about is, and I've talked about this before, who are you without the things you do? All right. Who are you without the things you do? So a lot of the time people attribute who they are and their value on what they produce. Right. But I'd actually encourage you to look a little bit deeper than that. Like, what is it taking all that away? If what is left, who is left? What are your values, your beliefs? What are the things that excite you? That really is more to do with who you are. How do you function in the world? Are you an empath? All these things. Yes, Sips, welcome. So it's something to consider, right? And so, like I said, set realistic goals and priorities that align with your values and aspirations at any age. Pay attention to what your values and aspirations were as a child that still remain, right? Yes, bro. Sorry, I don't necessarily share screen on this particular format, but let's talk afterwards. I'll message you afterwards. It'd be good to catch up. Good to catch up, bro. Okay, so number 5 is connect with a supportive community of individuals who embrace aging with positivity and vitality. Vitality is to do with your energy, is to do with your life force. Connect with supportive community of individuals who embrace aging with positivity and vitality. If you're around people who see growing old as a positive and vitality producing event, then you will feel positive and you'll feel the vitality as a result, especially if you see them living it out, right? And it can completely change your perspective. Like I said, I'm fortunate enough to have enough older generation within my my network, for me to see what it looks like to be growing older and growing more vitality as you get older, right? I see that and it excites me. Right, it excites me, and it means that I don't have the fear that some others may have. The last but not least is seeking therapy and counseling to address underlying fears and anxieties about aging and mortality. You might have experienced people growing older. It might have thrown the fear of old age into you, growing as you were younger, right? Societal expectations. You've seen people decline in health and appearance. You've seen people grow closer towards death and lose their functionality, etc. You've seen people. You've got anxiety because you're worried about living an unfulfilled life, and you have a sense of urgency to do things now in case you don't have, because tomorrow isn't promised, and all these kind of things. You don't want to risk not living up to your potential. You may have a sense of regret for missed opportunities. You have decision paralysis because you're thinking too much about growing old, and you end up procrastinating and have a fear of abandonment, or fear of failure, or fear of missing time, a lack of fulfillment due to pressure to accomplish everything at once. You might be experiencing all these things. But if you have visual representations of people who are living a completely different lifestyle, which actually makes it seem enjoyable, fun, exciting to become older, I promise you those fears will be at bay. Okay. So just to recap on the 6 things you can do about it. Number 1 is embrace the aging process as a natural part of life with its own beauty and wisdom. Number 2 is focus on healthy lifestyle habits and self-care to to maintain physical and mental well-being. Number 3, cultivate a positive outlook on aging by seeking out role models and resources that celebrate aging gracefully. Number 4 is set realistic goals and priorities that align with your values and aspirations at any age. Number 5 is connect with a supportive community of individuals who embrace aging with positivity and vitality. And number 6 is seek therapy or counseling to address underlying fears and anxieties about aging and mortality. Do those 6 things, and they will genuinely help you with reducing that fear, because we cannot live in fear. We're not designed to. We quite literally are not designed to. Fear brings an increase in cortisol within the body, which grows toxic if it's not dealt with. If it stays at a high level for a prolonged period of time, you start to see physical ailments. That's where your back pains happen. That's when you start getting rashes and boils on your skin. That's when you start feeling insomnia and changes in behavior. You start becoming irritable. All these kind of things start happening because of this hormonal imbalance within your body. So fear is not good for you on a long period of time. It's good in moderation. It's good for us to get into an active state. It's then to put to sleep some of our other hormones and other functionalities, so that we can fight or flight. For example, if we need to do something right now, it gives us that adrenaline rush to be able to do that thing right now. But if we keep that adrenaline high, keep that cortisol in our body high, it can be detrimental to us over time. And just imagine if you have a fear of old age, which is something that's inevitable, that you're constantly taking one step closer towards with each moment, then that fear will just grow, which means the cortisol grows, which means that all the symptoms and stuff will continue to grow. There's a lot of people out there who are living in fear and don't realize where it's coming from. If I'm talking today and you realize that you resonate with some of this, then I encourage you to give me a call. Just give me a call. Like I said, later on today, I'm going to put a link out, which is going to be for 30-minute sessions with me. And it's at a reduced rate. And it will just be something where we'll sit down and we'll talk about what is it that you're experiencing, what we can do about it for you specifically. What happens on these spaces is I talk about conditions generally, but I want to sit down with you individually if it's something that you need. And we'll talk about it. We'll see what we can do about it. We'll see what you've experienced so far, what the next steps could be, and what resources, what exercises we can do in that moment, in that session, that can help relieve some of that stress, which is happening within your body, or the stressor, which is what is causing the worry, right? So I hope today has been helpful for you. Remember to keep posted, keep connected. Let me know what is working for you, what isn't, what is resonating, what isn't, what I can do better with these sessions, right? What do you want me to cover, which I haven't covered already? And thank you so much for joining. Yes, Abiona, I see you there on LinkedIn. And yes, I see you, Michelle. Pav was good. Andrea, Dean, so glad to see you still here. It's been a pleasure to share time with you. Thank you for joining. And I'll see you tomorrow morning, where I'm talking about the fear of death. Michelle says, what times are you offering the discount for? It's going to be all afternoon. So it's going to start from 2:00 till about 8:00. I'm going to be creating the sessions later on this morning, and then I'm going to go live with them maybe around midday. So have a look on my page for that. I'm going to put them it's going to be in the bio. But yes, if this is something that you feel like you need, just keep an eye out, or just send me a message later on. Yeah. And I'll do one specifically for you. Okay. So if I haven't done it by the time you're ready, if this is something you actually need, thinking about it, then just message me directly. Just send me a little reminder, say, I am interested in the £50 sessions later on today. Just say that in my inbox, and I'll create that. I'll make sure you've got priority before I even create it. Yeah. All right. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's an absolute pleasure to be serving you. Like I said, tomorrow is the last day of the series for the 6 days of the basic fears and how to burn out. If you're experiencing burnout, then make sure to share this live with them. Help them. This is free. Like there's no cost to this bit. This is just general information that's raising awareness, because I think a lot of people are going through things they're not aware that they're going through. And so make sure to share it with them. Let them know what's going on. It might raise concerns. It might raise insight. It might raise attention to something that they may not have been paying attention to, which means that if they catch it early, it's something that can be dealt with easily. Catching it late can be a lot more difficult to deal with. Yeah. So make sure if there's someone you know who you're like, I feel like that person's burning out. They're doing 1,001 things all the time. They seem to be snappy. They're changing their behaviors. They're going through detrimental coping mechanisms. That glass of wine at night is turning into a bottle of wine, and I'm worried about their health. They seem to be losing concentration and forgetting things a lot. Like, if you're worried about them, send this to them. I'm putting everything I have is lives on they're done as reels on Instagram. On Instagram, go at your burnout coach. There you go. At your burnout coach. That is where they're going to be saved, or in the reels of this live. And if you're on Instagram or LinkedIn, LinkedIn or YouTube, I save them as well. The best place, to be honest, is on YouTube, because I'm just going to go onto the Ebola Global Coaching page on YouTube and go to the lives, and all of them are there. Sip says, sorry, after please can we talk poetry ideas after this live? Sorry to ask you. Yeah, sure, no worries. We can talk poetry after this. I've got a call at 9 o'clock. But yes, we can have a conversation then. I'll message you after this. Yes, Dean, definitely. No doubt. Like I said, every morning I'm going to be doing this for as long as I can. I really want to do this as part of this. For me, is getting my ideas out, my thoughts out. Later on, I'm going to turn all of this stuff into a book, something that you can tangibly get. And I genuinely, I've developed a Revive framework to help people recover from burnout. And I'll talk about that one day when I start doing the, the programs that I'm running. But at the moment, it's just information. I figure if I help as many people as I can, then I can impact as many people as I can. And if you share, then it can help me impact more people. And then if people need more help, then they can come to me for one-to-one coaching. All right. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your feedback. I really appreciate you. And I hope this has been helpful for you. I'll be here again tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you miss it, then just go to my pages and rewatch the live. But please, if you would rewatch it, like, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment. Comments are really good because it lets me know what I should do next. Is there something I'm missing? If you want something that I want, if there's something you want me to talk about specifically, then let me know, because that gives me more ideas of what you need. Right now, all of this is just coming from my head. If there's anything you want me to cover, put it in the comments and I'll make sure I cover it. Until then, have an amazing day, and I'll see you all tomorrow.